Professional wrestling is unlike any other sport because not only does it require you to be a world-class athlete, it also requires you to be a professional pretender. The WWE and adjacent organizations are essentially an action-packed reality TV show, with scripted monologues, pre-planned match results, and wrestlers acting as larger-than-life heroes or ruthless supervillains. Terry Gene Bollea played the character of Hulk Hogan, an all-American gladiator who could destroy any man, no matter how big or strong. To say he was a superstar is an understatement. For the better part of a decade, he was the face of the entire industry. Now, being a celebrity is already going to create ego problems. It's hard to remain humble and honest when people treat you as larger than life. But with Hogan, it goes a step further. Most method actors work on a role for a few years maximum, and then they are able to go back to real life or transition to a new film role. But Hulk Hogan has played the same exact character for 35 years. Every match he wrestled to every word he spoke was a carefully crafted novel from a team of writers shaping the public's perception.
The character of Hulk Hogan is impeccable. It always has been. There are no holes in his character at all.
Unfortunately, every part of his life that he could not control with his team of writers came crashing down. From ruthless cheating on his wife with his daughter's best friend, to getting caught admitting to being a full-blown racist, to nearly having his entire legacy erased from the history books. Hulk Hogan got so caught up in his endless lies that it destroyed his reality. This is how it happened. Terry was raised in Tampa, Florida, where he started watching professional wrestling on TV after school, admiring the brute force he'd see on screen. Although he enjoyed the spectacle, Terry was still focusing on high school baseball. He often talks about how he was on his way to making it big, that is, until his body reached its limit.
I was scouted in 10th and 11th grade by the Cincinnati Reds and New York Yankees. I pitched and played third base, and a guy stepped outside the box and he hit the ball in the handle, and as the ball dribbled down the third base line, I picked it up and I threw it underhanded to first base, and I broke that cap off my elbow. They put a cast on my arm and that cap went back on, but after that, my pitching arm was screwed from third base. I didn't have the same arm.
Since Hogan became such a superstar, one would assume that there would be some sort of confirmation from the Yankees or Reds that they were once scouting the wrestling phenom. However, there is no proof that that ever happened. It became a theme in Hogan's life to embellish or exaggerate stories, so much so that people stopped believing any word he says. One of his favorite stories is how he almost played bass guitar for Metallica. After his baseball career came to a screeching halt, Terry decided to pursue music, spending a decade playing fretless bass guitar in several Florida-based rock bands. By 1976, he formed a band called Ruckus with 2 local musicians. He even claimed he was so good, one of the most legendary rock bands of all time recruited him. I used to be a session musician before I was a wrestler. I played bass guitar. I was big pals with Lars Ulrich, and he asked me if I wanted to play bass with Metallica in their early days, but it didn't work out. Just a few days after Hogan said this, Lars Ulrich went on the Howard Stern show and said that he has a photographic memory, but I certainly have no recollection of doing anything with, quote, Hulk Hogan, end quote. After Lars called out Hogan's lie, the Hulk drastically changed his story.
Metallica needed a bass player, and I, oh my God, would I love to be in Metallica, so I put the word out everywhere. I wanted to get an audition to be in Metallica. Never heard from them either.
Perhaps Hogan became accustomed to scripting his persona in his career that he tried to boost up his real-life story a bit. Sure, this could be seen as harmless exaggerations, but this bad habit would slowly leak into almost every facet of his life, and eventually lead to his demise. Have you ever Googled your name and seen yourself on one of those strange sites that has way too much information about you? Feels pretty weird. I'd really rather that kind of stuff wasn't available to anyone who's looking for it. Data brokers are making tons of money selling your information to robocallers and spammers. In the past year, there was a breach of the national public data. The incident compromised over 2.9 billion records used for background checks, including critical personal information such as full names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, and most importantly, social security numbers. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura can find the data brokers that are sharing your information. These brokers are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, however, they make it very difficult to do so. That's where Aura comes in and submits opt-out requests for you. You can try Aura free for 2 weeks using my link, aura.com/PatrickCC. Aura has many other features to protect you and your family, like antivirus, VPN, parental controls, password management, identity theft, and more. Aura has them all in one place and you get everything for one affordable price. I have a ton of passwords for all my different accounts, and Aura's password manager is a lifesaver. It helps me keep them all organized and will even let me know if any of them have been compromised. Their spam call protection is great too. Nobody likes those random numbers and scammy texts. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches and brokers. And if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/PatrickCC to try 2 weeks for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data is exposed. Thanks, Aura. When he wasn't absolutely shredding the bass guitar, Terry spent the rest of his days getting shredded at Hector's Gym in Tampa, Florida. He encountered many wrestlers from the Florida region who frequented the bars where he performed. I started playing in this kick-ass rock and roll band, and a couple wrestlers came into the show. Then a couple of nights later, even more came in, because they had told each other that there was this kick-ass band, and because there was a kick-ass band, there was all this hot ass running around, you know? All of a sudden, before I knew it, there was a bunch of wrestlers at our gigs. These were regional wrestlers who would wrestle in Tampa, Miami, Orlando, and Tallahassee, so they'd come back to Tampa every night, where we would all be playing till 3 a.m. in the morning. Notable attendees included Jack and Gerald Briscoe, better known as the Briscoe Brothers, a tag team wrestling duo in the area. In 1976, the Briscoe Brothers encouraged Hogan to pursue wrestling after being impressed by his growing physical stature, and in 1977, Hogan embarked on his rookie season as a wrestler. Hulk said in his 2010 autobiography that Elvis Presley was a huge fan of his at the time, but Elvis died 11 days after Hogan's first match in 1977, and that match was not in Memphis, Tennessee, which is where Elvis was. Terry didn't actually commit to a full-blown wrestling career until 1979 when he adopted the stage name Terry the Hulk Boulder. Spending his early years on the independent circuit, he then appeared in various wrestling promotions, including a brief stint in the WWF, before settling in New Japan Pro Wrestling, where he made a name for himself.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday comes again.
毎日
Sunday,
毎
Monday,
日
Tuesday,
日
Wednesday,
立の細長
Thursday, Thursday, Friday,
静か
Saturday,
サラサラ
Sunday comes again.
綺麗な空気
And while Hogan was growing his brand in East Asia, he claimed in his autobiography, My Life Outside the Ring, that his work in the region allowed him to wrestle 400 days per year. If I say I wrestled 400 days a year, it's no exaggeration. My years were actually longer than 365 days. There were times when I'd fly back and forth to Japan twice a week just to wrestle. Now, it was nothing to wrestle in Madison Square Garden one day, then fly all the way to the Egg Dome in Tokyo the same day, because you'd gain 14 hours and then fly back to the West Coast and so on. So I could wrestle in Japan today and then fly back across the international date line and land in another town yesterday. I was constantly adding days to my years. Now, there are no records of Hogan wrestling in Madison Square Garden one day and then the Egg Dome the day after. Now, it's unclear if Hogan was serious or just trying to make a silly exaggeration, but his wrestling 400 days per year has become a meme to poke fun at his relentless lies. Regardless, it's safe to say that Hogan was a huge star in the wrestling world. At the time, the United States had defined territories that different wrestling federations controlled. Hogan was one of the few who wrestled in basically every territory. He was able to help draw new interest locally and sell tickets since he was a national star. He said in his autobiography that he was the first wrestler to walk out to the ring to music, revolutionizing the sport. But Sergeant Slaughter, Chris Colt, Mildred Burke, and wrestlers from the 50s and 60s had entrance music. However, major changes were on the horizon. Vince McMahon bought the WWF from his father, the territory that controlled the northeast sector of the US. Vince was planning an all-out takeover of the entire industry. His vision was to sign the best and most popular wrestlers exclusively to the WWF, so they could not wrestle in any other promotion but his own. Although this is extremely common today, back then it was seen as a merciless business practice intended to dismantle the wrestling industry and create one giant monopoly. And as we all know, It worked. But after Hogan's acting role in Rocky III, he became a mainstream superstar. And at that moment, Vince McMahon knew who the face of the WWF was going to be. Terry established himself as a fan favorite, and within 1 month, he won his first WWF World Heavyweight Championship at Madison Square Garden. From there, his takeover was in full effect. He was headlining WWF events every night to sold-out crowds across the Northeast, continuing to amplify his superstardom.
I feel no pain. I fear no man.
In his interviews, Hogan often referred to his fans as Hulkamaniacs and introduced his 3 demandments: training, saying prayers, and eating vitamins. Over time, he added a 4th demandment: believing in oneself. Hulk was larger than life, physically and metaphorically. He stood at a staggering 6 foot 7 inches tall and weighed 295 pounds with 24-inch biceps, all while containing a superstar aura that he described as being similar to a cult leader.
Do you know anything about Hulkamania?
Hulkamania?
Hulkamania.
If you want me to. What is Hulkamania?
Well, Hulkamania is the newest thing, Johnny. It's the thing that is sweeping the country. I'm sure some of these guys over here might know about it. It's like a new cult. And it's like follow the leader. Everybody does what the Hulkster does. It's like truth, justice, and the Hulk Hogan way.
Hogan's image was plastered on action figures, lunchboxes, and video games, making him a pop culture phenomenon and one of the most recognizable figures worldwide. He was named the most requested celebrity of the 1980s for the Make-A-Wish Foundation's children's charity, being featured on the covers of Sports Illustrated, TV Guide, and People magazine, while also having his own CBA Saturday morning cartoon titled Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. He was officially the face of professional wrestling. Hogan and Vince McMahon developed a very close relationship. Even though Vince was a ruthless businessman who often took advantage of his wrestlers, Hogan seemed to protect the interests of the corrupt CEO rather than his fellow co-workers. At least that's what WWE Hall of Famer Jesse Ventura says.
You and Hulk were once good friends.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood of that ever being repaired?
Never.
What?
Can't trust him. And he's the one that ratted me to Vince when I tried to unionize. I found that out under federal deposition when Vince was put under SWORD, and he didn't hesitate at all. I told my lawyer the story, and in deposition you could ask about anything. And so I wanted to know who ratted me in the locker room, because there were no agents, no one from the office was in there when I did it. So it had to be one of the boys. And when my attorney said, Mr. McMahon, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And Vince said, no. He said, has anyone ever tried to? And Vince said, well, I think Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it once before. And my attorney said, did you hear Mr. Ventura? No. Well, then how do you know he did? With no hesitation, Vince went, Hulk Hogan told me. And I didn't show any emotion, but I almost tipped over in the chair because he was my friend. And I thought, but then I understand why. When we went to court, I saw in WrestleMania 3, Hogan got paid more than all of us combined. Now, why would he want a union when he's getting taken care of?
Then again, many wrestlers of this era, like Greg Valentine, say he was a great guy.
When I was wrestling in Florida, when he was still playing the guitar at a band, I met him there. So we always, he's a mellow guy, and he likes to smoke the and he don't like getting drunk and crazy and all that. Just a real nice guy, Florida boy, down to earth. So I got along with that type. And my wife, Julie, who I'm still married to now, my wife, beautiful wife, Julie, and Linda became really good friends. So.
Nothing could slow down Hogan's dominance, and his reckless actions would lead to his first major controversy. During an interview in 1985, he choked out TV personality Richard Belzer, causing him to lose consciousness. Then he dropped his unconscious body to the floor, where he split his head wide open and required an immediate hospital visit where he received 9 stitches.
Called a front chin lock. How about it, T?
Keep like that for a little while.
Hogan must have forgotten that he wasn't in a scripted wrestling match. Putting a man half his size in a chokehold was incredibly dangerous, and it's surprising he only needed a few stitches. Belzer ultimately sued Hogan and they settled out of court, but the incident arguably just made Hogan seem more lethal, adding to his brand of being an unstoppable warrior. Then something extremely rare happened. Hogan lost a match. He lost the WWF World Heavyweight Championship to Andre the Giant. At this point, it was only the second time he ever lost. Even though technically he didn't get legally pinned, the referee just wasn't paying attention to him lifting his shoulder. Plus, this was, of course, pre-planned to make Hogan look like the underdog for their match at WrestleMania 3, where Terry wrote the entire script for the match himself.
In WrestleMania 3 at the Pontiac Silverdome, did you call it or did he call it?
I wrote it all down on a piece of paper for Vince, and Vince gave it to him.
Well, now, hold on now. So you were afraid. You would testify now that, I mean, you physically were afraid of him because, I mean, he...
No, I wasn't afraid of him, but he was in just so much pain that, we really weren't sure. Vince came to me the night before. We weren't sure the way the finish was going. So I said, let me write down a plan A Hulk Hogan match. It'll blow the roof down out of the place. So Vince took out his big yellow pad, his big yellow notebook pad, and I wrote down center of the ring. He pushes me, or I push him. I can't remember. I go. He throws a punch. I block it. 1, 2, 3 punches. Go to pick him up. I fall backwards. First time I've ever done it in my life.
Hogan finished the match by picking up the 6'10", 400 or 500 something pound beast and slammed him.
Everybody knocks me for this on the internet, and everybody always just says BS. But the honest to God's truth is they weighed him in. They always said he was the 500-pound Andre the Giant. But we weighed him at the scales at the baggage claim in Detroit. When we came to Detroit,
the baggage claim?
He was about 697 because he'd gained a bunch of weight, and he had that huge back surgery to England. He was in a ton of pain.
The match was watched by 33 million live viewers, making it the most watched wrestling match in history still to this day. However, this was Hulk Hogan's peak, and his dominance as the #1 wrestler in sports entertainment was coming to a close. He was able to generate excitement for a few more years when he teamed up with WWF's second biggest talent, Macho Man Randy Savage, to form the Mega Powers. The legendary tag team was a fan-favorite partnership built on mutual respect after Hogan saved Savage from a beatdown, leading to their iconic handshake that symbolized their unity. But in the early 90s, the tides began to turn against Hogan and wrestling as a whole, as Vince McMahon and the WWF were being investigated for the rampant steroid usage throughout the business.
One of these little dudes out there that's been training, saying his prayers, and eating his vitamins, someday he's gonna knock me off.
He is the king of the ring, but many former wrestlers say it wasn't prayers and vitamins that made Hulk Hogan a giant in the eyes of kids.
I myself personally have injected Hulk Hogan with anabolic steroids.
Did the biggest star in pro wrestling get to the top by using dangerous drugs?
Although wrestling is scripted, to say that it's fake is definitely disrespectful. It's no secret that wrestlers regularly face extreme physical demands, enduring injuries and chronic pain due to the rigorous nature of their back-breaking profession. The combination of intense training, frequent matches, and the expectation to maintain peak performance levels, it leaves little time for proper recovery, and as a result, illicit substances are sometimes misused as a quick solution to manage pain, allowing athletes to continue competing. Not to mention the aesthetic benefits. The bigger, stronger, and more muscular you looked, the more potential you had to become a star. The number of pills that were being handed out at the WWE at the time was mind-boggling. Following the increasingly thorough coverage of adverse effects, steroids were prohibited in the United States after the passing of the Anabolic Control Act of 1990, meaning trafficking steroids is handled similarly to trafficking cocaine or LSD. As the act went into full effect, the athletic industry as a whole was being viewed through a different lens, because performance-enhancing drugs took away from the fairness of the game. But wrestling is an interesting point of contention because the matches were scripted and pre-planned. Therefore, it's kind of impossible to have an unfair competitive edge. There was a doctor that would meet us in Hershey Park, and he walked in with 6 or 7 suitcases full of pills and steroids. That was a big foul up because you could go in there and ask him for Valium Valium, Halcyon, steroids, pain pills, whatever your heart desired. And that alleged doctor was George T. Zahorian, who got a job as a ringside doctor for the WWF in 1984. 5 years later, the FBI started quietly investigating the doctor's questionable business practices. The feds subpoenaed Zahorian's FedEx records, uncovering regular shipments to Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, and other wrestlers on Vince's payroll. And this was enough evidence to indict Zahorian on 15 counts of distributing controlled substances.
Then all of a sudden there would be a line that would form to see Dr. Zahorian. Well, after a while, it was known by everyone what was going on. That's all these guys were getting their stuff.
They lined up.
Absolutely lined up.
To get steroids.
Yeah, sure.
Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, Rick the Model Martel, Dangerous Dan Spivey, and Fly-In Brian Blair were all subpoenaed to testify at the trial. They all appeared, except for Hogan, who was excused, even though Dr. Zahorian stated that he had known and successfully treated him for a serious steroid abuse problem.
Hogan went to the media to set the record straight that he has used steroids, but never abused them.
So basically, I was insulted when basically the inferences or the speculation said, well, all you gotta do is take a pill or take a shot in the butt every day to get to look like Hulk Hogan. And basically, I've trained 20 years. I'm 38, 37. I'll be 38 in a couple months. Oh my God, why did I say that? But I've trained 20 years, 2 hours a day to look like I do. But the things that I am not is I'm not a steroid abuser, and I do not use steroids. But there's a situation where steroids, Hulk Hogan, and my private physicians have something all in common, and these are the situations. When I first won the world title in '83, I was wrestling almost 300 days a year, and on 2 or 3 different occasions, I got hurt in the ring. I had to make a decision of going into surgery, have my back, my deltoid, and my bicep cut and reattached with staples, or do the sports therapy route. And if I was to get cut on with a knife and all this type of thing, basically I'd be in a sling, and a year later, well, we don't know what's going to happen to your career. And at that time, I didn't have any money. So basically, I made the right decision. And that sports therapy involved prescription drugs by my physician that I trusted, legal prescription drugs. And those involved basic anti-inflammatories and a synthetic male hormone, which is a form of a steroid.
Right.
And on 3 different occasions, I had the same type muscle injuries. That is the extent of Hulk Hogan's steroid use.
His story seems believable, but his stuttering and pattern of lying about small details in his life made people think that this was just another tale. And they were right, because in 1994 he testified in court detailing nearly 14 years of steroid abuse. Mr. Balea said that steroid use was fairly common among wrestlers. He said he would call Mr. McMahon's executive secretary and ask her to place an order for me with Dr. Zahorian, but he believed it was legal because he had a prescription for it. Zahorian was ultimately found guilty for providing steroids to countless athletes, but Vince McMahon was acquitted of these charges because they didn't have enough evidence to prove that he was involved in these transactions or that he was forcing wrestlers to take steroids. Maven, who was an active WWE wrestler from 2001 to 2005, said that steroid use in the company did not change after this trial.
What percentage of the wrestlers do you think were taking steroids during this time? 100%?
No, not 100. I'd say it was probably, 85 or 90. Easy.
Right. They're not drug testing because it's not an actual sport.
No, they drug tested us.
They drug tested you?
Absolutely.
Really?
Here's how it happened. I still remember getting called into the office and pulling up a piece of paper and going, Maven, you popped positive on Winstrol, Deca, a little bit of marijuana, and some painkillers. Don't let it become a habit.
That was that.
And out the door I went. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a different world.
So they knew about it and they just didn't care.
Regardless, after the trial, Hogan's reputation to the public was tarnished. It didn't quite hit the same to portray him as this illustrious American hero inside the ring. Vince McMahon said his career was finished, and the WWF needed younger, fresher, and edgier talent to maintain interest in the sport. Hogan left professional wrestling to pursue a career in film and television. He already had a few movie roles at this point, such as Rip in No Holds Barred and Shep Ramsey in Suburban Commando, but in 1993 we saw his next big motion picture, Mr. Nanny. This film was about a former professional wrestler who is hired to be the nanny for a couple of bratty kids.
Now, he's got to bring them back, because he's not just a babysitter. He's Mr. Nanny.
As you can imagine, this film, and all his other films, were abysmal box office failures. But lucky for him, he was being scouted by one of the WWF's biggest competitors, World Championship Wrestling, and they were going to save his career. WCW's Executive Vice President, Eric Bischoff, declared open war on the WWF and used financial backing from Ted Turner to aggressively recruit and sign former high-profile WWF wrestlers such as Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, and Dusty Rhodes. But they knew Hulk Hogan would drastically increase their visibility, and in 1994, he signed with WCW.
I told ya! Hulkamania was gonna run wild in the WCW, brother! Look at all the Hulkamaniacs!
Bischoff offered Hogan total creative control over his character, in addition to a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract at a time where just a few of the top wrestlers were maybe receiving around $1 million a year. Giving this much power to Hogan would eventually be the demise of the brand. While Hogan has denied ever using his creative control in the WCW, former employees have claimed otherwise. Apparently, at the Bash at the Beach match in 1994, legendary wrestling writer Vince Russo wrote that Hogan was going to lose his match to Ric Flair, to which Hogan initially agreed with, but then allegedly changed his mind at the last minute. Hogan's attorney sent a fax to WCW's office after the closing hours on Friday. The pay-per-view is Sunday. Sends the fax to the office after closing hours stating Hulk Hogan was going to play his creative control card and was not going to do what was written. Friday after the office closes and everybody is on their way to the Bash at the Beach, so nobody saw this fax prior to the show. Russo's recollection seems to make sense because in the final moments of the match, Ric Flair is seen hitting Hogan, to which Hogan is not reacting, only for him to put his finishing move on Flair and pin him for the title. This is one small example of what many believe to be Hogan's abuse of power in the WCW, a man who is so enthralled in his own ego that he believes his character and persona is more important than the entire 80-man roster. He even scripted himself to beat every top wrestler on the roster and made himself the champion for 469 days, the longest in WCW history. Or maybe he's just that dominant. Likely sensing that the people were tired of the Hulkamania shtick for the past 2 decades, he finally turned heel, which is a wrestling term for becoming an anti-hero or villain. He formed the legendary trio New World Order or NWO alongside Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. He dropped the bright yellow and red and opted for all black. He even dyed his beard black. NWO was a drastic change not just for Hogan, but all of wrestling. The gritty anti-establishment and gang-like persona brought attitude to wrestling, removing the glitz and glam of the heroic athletes of the 80s. They were selling millions of dollars in merchandise and genuinely stealing viewership from the WWF. Hogan's vision for NWO nearly put WCW in the #1 spot, but then, many believe Hogan drove it into the ground. Everything that has a meteoric rise needs to fall, whether it be in the real world or scripted television. But Hogan did not want the NWO to fall, and many have accused him of never passing the torch. He seemingly never wanted to let anyone beat him, which does add up considering he only has 14 clean losses in his entire wrestling career. Instead of scripting the downfall of NWO when it got stale, they did the opposite. They expanded, making the once tight-knit anti-establishment crew seem like a bloated club that anyone could join. Then they relentlessly pursued this confusing storyline where there was a division within NWO where Hogan was the leader of NWO Hollywood and Kevin Nash was the head of NWO Wolfpack. And then the entirety of WCW storylines were centered around this uninteresting internal battle of a gang. Many speculate that it was all just Hogan trying to keep the entirety of WCW around his brand. And to make it worse for them, the WWF developed some of the most electrifying and entertaining characters and storylines in the late 90s with legends like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, and many more. But the WCW's credibility was permanently damaged after the infamous incident called the Finger of Doom. They heavily marketed and hyped up the incredible battle of Hogan versus Nash for the World Heavyweight title. 2 anti-heroes who created a movement and now were fighting to decide who gets control of the whole thing. The match began and Hogan gave a light poke to Nash's chest, then he pinned him, and they get up and hug, laughing in the faces of viewers for thinking that NWO could be divided. They thought this would make them look just as badass and anti-establishment when they debuted in 1996, but it did the opposite. Fans thought it was pathetic, bad storytelling, and just boring, and the WWF took over. And yet, even after ratings were in the toilet, that still did not stop Hulk from abusing his creative control. Hogan was scheduled to challenge Jeff Jarrett for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. However, before the match, Hogan was involved in a backstage dispute with scriptwriter Vince Russo. While Russo wanted Jarrett to come out on top, Hogan wanted the title for himself, which resulted in one of the few moments when a wrestler intentionally and obviously went off script. Russo instructed Jarrett to walk in the ring, lie down, not fight back, and let Hogan pin him to become the world champion. In the past, Hogan had forced many wrestlers to metaphorically lie down for him, but he was shocked when someone so blatantly did it in front of the entire world. And after Hogan left the ring with the title, Russo returned to express what just happened, and this wasn't scripted. He was telling the truth.
All day long, I'm playing politics with Hulk Hogan because Hulk Hogan tonight wants to play his creative control card. And to Hulk Hogan, that meant that tonight in the middle of this ring, when he knew it was bullshit, he beats Jeff Jarrett. Well, guess what? Hogan got his wish. Hogan got his belt and he went the hell home, and I promise everybody else I'll go in the goddamn grave. You will never see that piece of shit again.
And after that moment, Hogan was never seen in the WCW ever again. After Russo's rant, the fans realized just how much control Hogan had. He could decide what would happen with his own character and everyone else's, without anyone being able to stop him. In response to this rant, Hogan filed a defamation lawsuit against Russo, but he had absolutely no case whatsoever, and it was dismissed in 2002. Hogan's creative control became such a widely discussed issue that a long-standing meme holds in the wrestling community, quoting Hogan as saying, "That's not gonna work for me, brother." And although we don't know for certain he ever said this, it seems extremely likely. In February of 2002, Hogan made his return to the WWF as a heel at the No Way Out pay-per-view. He showed up as the leader of the original NWO with Hall and Nash, as the three immediately started causing problems with the company's top superstars, The Rock and Stone Cold. The Rock challenged Hollywood Hogan to a match at WrestleMania 18, billed Icon vs. Icon, and put on one of the greatest matches in WWE history. And to many people's surprise, Hulk Hogan actually lost. The crowd in Toronto Skydome overwhelmingly supported Hogan, creating an electric and unpredictable atmosphere. He received a standing ovation, and this would have been the perfect time to retire. This was his chance to pass the torch, respectfully and humbly take a loss, and gracefully bow out. He was 50 years old, a questionable businessman, but undeniably a legend. Plus, he simply did not fit in with the New Age wrestlers, but instead, he hung around and had a very lackluster exit from the company. Hogan fought the likes of Kurt Angle, teamed up with Edge to capture the Tag Team Championship, helped elevate in newcomer Brock Lesnar, and even went toe-to-toe with Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 19, where the two old guys actually put on a pretty good match. From there, Hogan had a stint where he wrestled as a masked superhero called Mr. America, who loosely resembled Captain America. Mr. America was seemingly an alter ego, as he used the same entrance theme, signature gestures, moves, and phrases as Hogan, despite repeatedly denying being Hulk Hogan. This storyline was terrible. During his last appearance on SmackDown, Mr. America unmasked to show the fans he was indeed Hogan, putting his finger on his lips and telling the fans to keep quiet, as if they didn't already know. It was later revealed that Hogan was just unhappy with his salary at the time and quit. But while Hogan's wrestling career was starting to slow down, the buzz surrounding his personal life was just picking up. His first major success outside of wrestling came in 2005 with the launch of his VH1 reality TV show, Hogan Knows Best, which, can we all acknowledge that the name of this show couldn't be any more obviously made up by Terry himself? Although the early 2000s were famous for giving every random celebrity or family their own TV show, there were a few diamonds in the rough. enough. Considering Hogan Knows Best ran for 4 seasons, also producing a 2-season spin-off for his daughter called Brooke Knows Best, it's safe to say that the fans liked it. It's also safe to say that this show led to the destruction of Hogan's family. Perhaps Terry needed to exist in a scripted environment since he spent the last 30 years working with Vince McMahon and teams of writers controlling his words and outcomes. Reality TV operates the same exact way, where their daily lives and conversations are portrayed as this found footage, caught on camera type reality, when it's all producers coming up with storylines and feeding people information to create drama and interest. His kids are portrayed as lazy and incompetent, very stereotypical rich kids living the high life with their dad's millions. His daughter, Brooke, is an aspiring singer and songwriter, trying to capitalize on the blonde bombshell aesthetic pioneered by Britney Spears. Unfortunately, she just made horrible music, so it didn't really work out. His son, Nick, seems to be in the process of discovering who he is, what he's interested in, and what type of career he wants to pursue. Tragically, one night in 2007, just 16 days after his 4th speeding ticket in 11 months, the 17-year-old was street racing in his Toyota Supra at top speeds before fishtailing and crashing into a tree. Nick's passenger, 22-year-old John Graziano, suffered severe brain damage that has left him permanently unable to speak, walk, or eat. While Hogan called his son in jail, the conversation was recorded, as all of them are. Transcripts of the conversation were revealed that many interpret as Hogan blaming the victim for this situation. Well, I don't know what type of person John was, what he did to get himself in this situation. I know he was pretty aggressive and used to yell at people and used to do stuff, but for some reason, man, God laid some heavy stuff on that kid, man. I don't know what he was into. In Hogan Knows Best's final season, they display the beginning of what would ultimately be the destruction of Terry and Linda's marriage.
I can't live like this, Terry.
Every day, it's drama. It's just ridiculous.
In case you can't tell, I've had it, okay?
Linda has verbally suggested maybe we should just be divorced.
So the words were spoken?
Yeah. It's just to the point where we cannot keep doing this.
I really don't care, because I sure as hell am not going to live like this anymore with you.
Terry, I just have one last thing to say to you, and I hope this is the last thing I ever have to say to you, is that I hope you realize now what you walked out on, and you know what? I hope this is just the beginning of your misery.
And to no surprise, they did end up getting a divorce after the show concluded. Hogan's darkest year was in 2007, when he wasn't wrestling or shooting his reality TV show. It's almost like the moment his every move wasn't being scripted or choreographed, he collapsed. The final nail in the coffin was when Linda discovered that Terry cheated on her with their daughter's best friend, Christian Plant. My relationship with Terry began at a time when Terry and Linda privately knew their marriage was ending, she told the tabloid. She had left him already, although no official papers had been filed. Christian tried to apologize to Brooke as she felt immense guilt. In a MySpace post, Brooke responded, "When your best friend and one of your closest family members that you have loved unconditionally since your first day on this earth betray you together, you could maybe find it in yourself to forgive one day, but you will never forget the hurt they caused you." As if it couldn't get any weirder, Linda, Hogan's ex-wife, started dating her son's 19-year-old friend, Charlie Hill, and ended up marrying him. While Hogan may have felt his worst days were behind him, and he could finally focus on repairing the mistakes and lies he told to his family and friends, it would all come back to haunt him again in 2012 when a tape between Hogan and Heather Clem surfaced online. In October 2012, Gawker, a celebrity blog site, released a short clip of the encounter. The site claimed they received the tape from an anonymous source who wanted no payment nor credit. Their only request was that we watch it. Hogan later told NBC's Today Show that the tape happened during a low point in his failing marriage to Linda Hogan. The tape was filmed in 2006, but Linda filed for divorce the following year. Things were bottomed out completely, Hogan said. "I was with some friends, and I made a wrong choice, and now all of a sudden it surfaces, over 6 years later, and it's just appalling." While most people saw this as another reflection of Hogan's bad character, it was a little deeper than what we saw on the surface. The tape was filmed in 2006, around the final taping of Hogan Knows Best. He was living at his friend Bubba's house on the brink of divorce and dealing with the darkest moment of his life.
People don't realize is that my best friend, Hulk Hogan, lived with me at his lowest point of his life in 2007. He was suicidal. I had to take a gun away from him at one time. He was going to kill himself. And we were coming home from the dollhouse one night. My wife and I had a semi-open relation. I mean, you know, we were. I wouldn't say we were necessarily in the lifestyle, but you know, I'm not a jealous guy. I've become calloused. So my best friend, my wife, is not that big a deal to me. And so
you guys were married. You guys were together.
Yeah, we were married, and so we're driving home from the dollhouse, and my wife calls me, and Hogan's down. He's going through the worst divorce ever. And I said, hey, Heather, have a little sexy outfit on and take care of my boy when we get home. And it was pretty much that. It was pretty much that simple.
Bubba claims that the tape was left on his work desk, and employees stole it and tried to extort Hogan for $1 million before ultimately leaking it to Gawker. But there isn't really much evidence to back this story, and it seemed like it could have been Bubba and Clem trying to set up their friend. As we know, this was the second time Hogan got caught cheating on his wife, so while nobody was claiming that he is a saint, most people agreed that leaking his tape was a violation of his privacy, which is why on October 15th, 2012, Hogan filed a lawsuit against Bubba and Heather Clem for invading his privacy, having recorded the encounter without his knowledge.
Do you have any idea before the sexual encounter happened that it was going to be filmed?
A settlement was reached on October 29th with Clem making a public apology to Hogan. Hogan later sued Gawker Media for posting the 90-second clip of the tape. And on March 18th, 2016, the jury delivered a verdict in favor of Hogan. In compensatory damages, Hogan was awarded $115 million, $55 million for economic harm, and $60 million for emotional distress. The jury later awarded him an additional $25 million in punitive damages. And while this might actually be seen as a huge win for Hogan, more shameful things from his past were coming to light, but this next one would nearly ruin his legacy permanently. More found footage of Hogan was released, but this time he was making racist comments regarding his daughter Brooke dating black men.
I've been trying to tell her, I've done everything fucking with him day and night on the radio like a jackass, and he's working with me to make it work. He goes out and really shouldn't call every day and do the shit I do. The South Beach record, this black billionaire guy, he basically did more for her a year than anybody's done. Okay, he had one song after 10 months, the shit went back up and back and back still. And momentum, but I try to be the realist, and this is your option. You got a better option. Said you can get signed with fucking. He's gonna put $500 million. How you go? Right now, there's nothing else. We're doing the best we can here. So it gets to the point where I don't know if Brooke was the black guy's son, where they've been hanging out. I caught them holding hands together on the tour. They were getting close. I knew before I'm giving a shit. I'm not a double standard type guy. I'm a racist to a point. Yeah. You know, then when it comes to nice people. We all are that way. Yeah, but when it comes to nice people, you can't say. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Other than football, other than a basketball player, to have if we're gonna offenders, let's get a rich one. This kid is a multi-billionaire. But the thing is, now they start doing these nasty emails, so someone will ride their relationship. And so now don't ever want to talk to anybody. No.
In July of 2015, National Enquirer and Radar Online were the first media outlets to publicize the situation. The recordings disappointed many within the wrestling community, forcing Hogan to come forward and address his racist behavior. 8 years ago, I used offensive language during a conversation. It was unacceptable for me to have used that offensive language. There is no excuse for it, and I apologize for having done it, Hogan said in a statement to People. This is not who I am. I believe very strongly that every person in the world is important and should not be treated differently based on race, gender, orientation, religious beliefs, or otherwise. This is obviously Hogan's biggest lie to date. Like, it's one thing to argue that something is out of context, or maybe something is a microaggression, but here this guy is 60-something years old, dropping hard R's and literally saying out of his mouth, "I'm a racist." It couldn't have been any more clear. The WWE was feeling more pressure than ever to respond to the actions of their once golden boy. And they did. By scrubbing Hulk Hogan from the WWE's website, the company removed almost all references to Hogan, including his listing as a judge for the reality competition show Tough Enough. They removed his merchandise from the WWE shop and his entry from its WWE Hall of Fame page. Hogan tried to reframe the narrative, with his lawyer claiming that Hogan chose to resign. However, WWE clarified the company terminated their contract with Hogan, stating that they are committed to embracing and celebrating individuals from all backgrounds. In response to the controversy, Mattel stopped producing Hulk Hogan's action figures, while Hogan's merchandise was removed from online stores of Target, Toys R Us, and Walmart. Hogan tried to add more context as to the reason why he decided to use these racist remarks in a carefully scripted interview with Good Morning America.
Are you a racist?
No, I'm not. I'm not a racist. I never should have said what I said. It was wrong. I'm embarrassed by it. But a lot of people need to realize that you inherit things from your environment. And where I grew up was South Tampa, and it was a really rough neighborhood, very low income. And all my friends, we greeted each other saying that word. The word was just thrown around like it was nothing.
Is it fair to say that you inherited a racial bias?
I would say that is very fair. The atmosphere, the environment I grew up in, all my white friends, all my black friends, to hear the word on a daily basis when they'd greet me in the morning. That's what they'd say to me. Good morning, so-and-so. I think that was part of the culture and the environment I grew up in.
Even though Hogan was ostracized from the wrestling community, many wrestlers continued to speak in support of him. Virgil commented, "Hogan has never given me a reason to believe he is a racist," while Kamala added, "I do not think Hogan meant harm by saying that. Hogan is my brother until he decides not to be." Dwayne Johnson initially expressed his disappointment, claiming to have known Hulk Hogan for a lot of years, assuring, "I'd not know him to be a racist," before strangely describing his racist rant as merely trash talk. WWE Hall of Famer Booker T addressed it as well.
Hulk Hogan, especially speaking right now.
And, he's an ambassador. He's a great ambassador for the game. He should be a part of it. Yes.
Well, with the whole, past N-word stuff and everything else, I know in a report it was like, hey, people deserve second chances.
Everybody deserves a second chance.
Yeah.
Life's all about it.
Even Steve Harvey spoke out in support for Hogan.
I have never used the word in a comedy special because it's not acceptable. Now, do I forgive him? Yeah. Do I think his career should be ruined because of it? No, I don't. Because if we're ruining people's career for that word right there, ain't none of us gonna be working.
Although wrestling fans were entirely fed up with Hogan's nonsense, it seemed like his celebrity friends and wrestling peers respected him enough to defend him publicly. On July 15th, 2018, Hogan was reinstated into the WWE Hall of Fame. He made his on-screen return 4 months later as the host of WWE's Crown Jewel pay-per-view event. In the following months, Hogan continued appearing on TV and would be inducted into the Hall of Fame a second time as a member of NWO, along with stablemates Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Sean Waltman. Now reaching 70 years old, it seems like Hogan is finally living the retired life, spending most of his days in Clearwater Beach, Florida with his new wife and focusing on new entrepreneurial endeavors like his Hogan's Hangout Bar and Grill and promoting his Real American Beer. There is no doubt that Hulk Hogan transformed wrestling. He is an icon who helped grow the sport to a level that was unimaginable, which has paved the way for many careers after him. And while most wrestlers are willing to compromise their creative vision or sacrifice the good of their character for the good of others, it seemed like Hogan could never do that. He wanted to remain the all-American hero, the #1 wrestler for as long as possible. However, you could argue that him refusing to get put over is what maintained his legacy. Think of all the guys who just let the writers determine their future, never let them fulfill their true potential, only for them to be forgotten. Some look at the deterioration of Hogan's personal life as some sort of godlike punishment for his decades of abusing his power. It's hard to give Terry the benefit of the doubt because, well, he has lied so much about his life, his past, even extremely small details that can easily be fact-checked. It's hard to know who Terry Bollea really is. Maybe he doesn't even know. However, one thing does seem certain about him. He may not be the best friend, he may not be the role model husband, he may not be a trustworthy businessman, but he does seem to care deeply about his fans.
But it's just amazing how
the fans have made this live forever.
Yeah.
You know, so it's amazing. And it's the fans that did it.